Hello, Bill Molyneux here for Bill's History and Wargame World, and today we are at Fort Frederick State Park at the Visitor Center, which is located about 300 yards from the fort itself. And we're going to be talking to Robert Ambrose, and oh my gosh, it's Goober the Traveling Bear. All right, let's go talk to Park Ranger Robert Ambrose here at Fort Frederick. I'll let him take it away because he knows everything about the fort.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. You are getting a view of the brand new museum here at Fort Frederick inside of our visitor center, which has been here since about 1982. For those of you who have never seen it, this is our office, our visitor center area, and kind of a catch-all auditorium. So you can come today and see our new exhibit, and you can also come and watch our 10-minute orientation video on fort history, and then walk up to the fort for yourself when you come and visit. Real quick, we'll just kind of run through the gallery. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through everything, but I can kind of give you an overview of what's here. And kind of what we've got is the story of Fort Frederick from before, the reasoning of the fort being here, with the beginnings of the French and Indian War and the disputes with between the French and the English, and of course the Indians, or the American Indians, caught in between. We have lots of visuals here. We have a number of famous and regional artists involved in this exhibit. We have lots of good information, and hopefully told in a way that it's easy to digest. So we talk about Fort Necessity and Braddock's defeat, and then we get into the construction of Fort Frederick in 1756. And here we have a diagram of kind of how we feel the fort was looked in the 1750s, as long as some of the construction tools and equipment that were used here to build the fort.
Now, Robert, I'd like to ask, I'm noticing your fort is made out of stone. I've done several videos recently. We were just at Fort Necessity 2 weeks ago. It was made out of wood. Why would they take the time and energy to build a stone fortification?
Well, I blame this guy right here, Governor Horatio Sharp. He had been a British military officer before he became the governor of Maryland, and he knew basically he had one chance at getting a good fortification here for the colony, and he wanted to build a stone. He wanted to build a stone simply because it couldn't be burned down. He pointed to Fort Granville in Pennsylvania being burned around the time the construction starts, to say, look, this is why we're taking the extra expense to build it of stone. We're never going to get burned down by French and Indian raiding parties. He also wanted Fort Frederick to be the next big thing. This is where the next campaign was going to jump off from. This is where we were going to go west and capture Fort Duquesne. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. However, it was a rendezvous for the Maryland troops, troops from the lower colonies of Pennsylvania, aka Delaware, and North Carolina, and a company of the 60th under Captain Jocelyn, 60th Foot, come here for a while before they moved west during the Forbes campaign, and it served as a base of supply. So it doesn't quite become what Governor Sharp wanted it, because it was a little further east than he wanted it. The Maryland Assembly said this is where it's going to go, so it's here. But it does play that role in that campaign, and it does its job. It's never directly attacked. Yes, there are some raids, there's some people shot outside, there are people killed and scalped within eyesight of the fort, but it's never attacked because it's built of stone, and French and Indian raiding parties are small and have muskets, and they're not going to breach this, and the French were probably never going to have a big enough force with artillery to come this far east to lay a siege to it as you would do. So yeah, so it was extra expense to build, and plus it was easier upkeep once it was up. You didn't have to worry about rotting logs and earth and all that. You had the stone. I mean, most of our fort wall today has been here since 1756. About 70% of it still standing as it was.
Wow. And I saw Ranger Bob Studi was posting pictures of things you found here, and this is a display case of what's a few of these items in here, because I can tell the key is there and an axe head. What else is in there?
So the top, this is a froe. This is for making shingles, for splitting shingles. I have a handle here, and you would hit it with a hammer or with a wooden hammer and to drive down and split the wood to make shingles. Different types of spikes and nails that would have been used in constructing the gates or the buildings. Those are pintles for hanging doors or shutters. Of course, you saw the hammer and the big axe. Here's a claw hammer, an 18th century claw hammer, and then this is one of our favorite pieces. This is a spike that was on top of the gate to help keep the enemy from climbing over.
Wow.
So you'll see that if you look at our fort gates today, we have that in our reconstruction, we have those spikes across the top of the gate.
All right. Well, continue on. I'll try not to keep interrupting you.
No, you're fine. So we kind of will jump here to the middle a little bit in the side. So we have museum figures representing different people you would have seen around Fort Frederick. The main three here in the middle are our laundress, talking about the role of the women who would have been here, and there were 8 women, and that's what we're going to talk about today at 1 o'clock. At 1 o'clock today, when I do my program about the women here at Fort Frederick. Beside her is a Maryland soldier. He is based off of a composite of deserter descriptions. So his height at 5'5", his hair color, his age, all of that is based off of deserter descriptions, including the uniform, the red coat, cuffed in black. So he is what the typical soldier would have looked like here on a regular basis. And then over here we have our officer, resplendent in his red suit. We know that several of the officers in their probate inventories and wills after they died had simple red suits, and they both of the gentlemen that we got that from died right after their service, so we're pretty sure that was their uniform. And we have this great image here of a militia officer from Maryland, Colonel Belt, I believe it is. Abraham Barnes, I'm sorry. Colonel Belt was a different guy. Abraham Barnes, and he has, as you can see, the red suit, and he served during the French and Indian War as well. So the uniform is an influence of our figure there. Each one of the figures has a case with artifacts related to their role here at the fort or their life at the fort.
So here's the artifact case, and I can't do justice for this little museum here. Please come out and visit, because I'm videoing the best I can, but there's a lot to see here. What's behind me here, Robert?
So our little tableau here represents when 62 Cherokee warriors showed up at Fort Frederick in April of 1757. And they would eventually form an alliance with the colony of Maryland. So this is sort of their first interaction. The two figures here, at least in some respects, represent real people. Our American Indian warrior, his name is Wahatchee. He was the head warrior here. And we represent the gentleman in the brown suit as Richard Paris, who was actually their translator for the rest of the Marylanders here. The big thing about this alliance that is formed is that the Maryland troops benefit greatly from it. The governor of Maryland basically says to the American Indians, he says, hey, you do me one big favor and you get all these gifts and all these presents. And it says, teach my men your ways of war. So he wants the Cherokee to teach the Marylanders how to fight in the woods. And eventually they would be very good at that. During the Forbes campaign, the Marylanders are some of the leading troops out leading the British Army west. And they are used on the footing of Rangers and Scouts, much like the American Indians would be used by the forces as well. So eventually the Marylanders will have adaptations, and here's a Maryland soldier kind of in his Indian dress, much like your French milice there, Bill, right? I mean, it's very similar attire, and so this is a good benefit, and the relationship works pretty well for about a year. The Cherokee are around, and
now would that happen to be you in this picture?
Yes, that is me. That is me in Indian dress. So I clean up pretty good, I guess. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the rest of it because I think we're running a little long on your video.
We're fine.
Okay.
I want to make sure. People can fast forward. They can also stop watching it, but there are some people that find my videos interesting. So let's finish this wall.
Yeah, so basically this wall tells the rest of the story from the end of the French and Indian War all the way up until today. We have some information about the fort and the Forbes campaign. We talk about its use during Pontiac's rebellion in 1763 when Fort Pitt gets besieged and the Battle of Bushy Run takes place. During that time, the fort is actually used as a settler refuge. It's never been a settler refuge until then. And an oral tradition states that over 700 militiamen and settlers were in the fort.
Wow.
Then we come to the Revolution, when the fort was used as a POW camp for British prisoners, and thousands of British prisoners were housed here from 1778 to 1783.
Let's see if. Wow. And I'm going to have to ask, we're right here in Maryland. Was this fort used for the American Civil War?
Yeah, so we come on down. Basically, after the Revolution, the fort sold as surplus property. It changes hands many times, becomes a farm. In 1850, Nathan Williams and his family show up here. By 1860, they purchase the property. Nathan Williams is an African-American gentleman who had been enslaved as a child. His father had gotten him out of slavery. Nathan's wife, Amy, so this is Nathan, this is his wife, Amy. Amy had also been enslaved. Nathan bought her out of slavery, purchased her freedom, and they lived here from 1850 until 1911. So they are the longest owners, other than the colony and state of Maryland, to own this property. And they're involved in a lot of things. Early African-American education. We're restoring the schoolhouse that they were part of right now. It's on park property. When that's done, we'll have to do a video on that.
All right.
So then the Civil War takes place while they're here. And Fort Frederick technically sees its only combat on multiple occasions. Now, the fort is probably not what's being attacked. The fort is where the soldiers are staying in the winter of 1861-62. They're fighting along the Potomac River to protect the C&O Canal and the B&O Railroad. But there are skirmishes, 3 infantry skirmishes and one or two artillery moments. One, the artillery's is literally a cannon was brought here, a train is going down the B&O Railroad, and they blow it up.
Wow, that must have been exciting.
Which was pretty cool. It was unfortunately was not a troop train, a Confederate troop train that they thought, but it was still a pretty big thing. And at that time in the war, basically the equivalent of the Associated Press picked it up, and story was printed all over the country. So that was a big deal. Now, Fort Frederick, not very important in terms of, say, Gettysburg, Antietam, those kind of things. There's bigger battles, but what I like to point out is here is the Battery F guidon for the 1st Pennsylvania Light Artillery with all of their battle honors on it. And one of my favorites is right here, Fort Frederick.
Fort Frederick. Well,
so
look at
it
that.
meant enough for them to put it on there. And I'm pretty sure it's on the 1st Maryland's monument, or on somebody else's monument. It's listed under battles. But here it is in gold leaf on the flag. So what they did here meant enough that they wanted to commemorate it. So yes, it's not a big battle, but it meant something for these guys. And the guys in the 1st Maryland Infantry who were here doing the infantry skirmishing, this was some of their first fighting. So can you imagine the first time the bullet whistled over your head would probably be something you'd remember for a long time. So after the Civil War, the fort goes back to the Williamses. In 1922, the state purchases the property and to help become one of Maryland's first state parks. And in the 1930s, Civilian Conservation Corps came here during the Great Depression and restored the fort walls, built many of the buildings outside of the fort that we see today. And since then, we've had a bicentennial of the fort. We've had a bicentennial of the country. And during the bicentennial of the country, the enlisted men's barracks were reconstructed. In 2006, we had the 250th anniversary of the fort. And we are pushing 265 now, I guess.
Wow.
I lose track after a while. We have it, so
Well, you're dealing with a lot of dates.
lots of dates. Yeah, so three centuries of history here. Theoretically, 4 military conflicts if you count Pontiac's as its own, and also the Great Depression. So you got 5 major tableaus of American history that have a footprint on here. Plus our agricultural heritage, plus the African American story. So we have a lot of history besides just
so Gettysburg's really just 3 days. You have several hundred years worth of history here.
Yes, and we try to do our best to tell all those stories with a small staff and limited time. We don't get to tell them the way we'd like, but we do like to focus on them when we can, and we do have some events that will have some of the features of that. We'll have our One Fort 3 Centuries in May, where we will highlight all the eras of the fort. We'll have a CCC weekend in October. September, sorry, and in October we'll have a Civil War weekend. So we've got, plus our French and Indian War muster, we'll do Rev War in July during the 4th of July holiday. So we try to branch out and see all that stuff.
And I guess before we close out, one big question is, what are your hours for both the visitor center and your fort? So when people see this video, they don't drive here and find something closed.
Yeah, so we are kind of in flux at the moment because we're coming out of the winter, moving into the spring hours. The visitor center is open 8 to 4 Monday through Friday right now. Hope soon it should be starting to open weekends in April. The fort will probably start opening weekends in April. But basically, Memorial Day to Labor Day,
We are good to go.
Thursday through Monday, the fort, barracks, and the store and all those things are open and staffed. Visitor center is open 7 days a week. At least 8 to 4. We have some other longer hours, but 8 to 4 is a good time to catch us on
All right.
Memorial Day to Labor Day.
So in a few more weeks, everything will really be hopping here, and I think this is one of Goober the Traveling Bear's favorite historic sites. And thank you for putting up with my videos. I think we'll say thank you, Robert, for this tour.
Thank you,
and
Bill.
Everyone out there, please stay safe, be kind, be courteous, and visit a historic site somewhere near you. Thank you.